I've spent a good chunk of my career insisting that proper UX work should only be done by proper UX people. And I told myself it was about protecting quality when honestly a fair amount of it was protecting my own job description. I would sit in meetings and watch a product owner sketch out a screen on a whiteboard and feel this small internal wince as if somebody had wandered into my kitchen and started rearranging the crockery. It felt professional at the time to be territorial and to defend my work, but that has not aged well. So, in this episode, I want to talk about something I now tell my clients fairly regularly, which would have absolutely horrified my younger self. And it's this: if you want better digital products, you probably don't get there by sending more work to your UX team. You get there by changing what you employ your UX team to do. And I know that sounds like the kind of thing somebody would say on a podcast to be provocative, but stick with me because I think the shape of the design team's job has genuinely changed underneath us over the last couple of years, and a lot of organizations haven't noticed yet. You have almost certainly seen this happen somewhere inside of your organization, even if nobody has talked about it out loud. Somebody, without design in their job titles, describes an idea to an AI tool and comes back a few hours later with a clickable prototype, realistic content, passable copy, and a flow that mostly hangs together. Developers are generating interface options before a ticket is even refined, and marketers are building and testing their own landing pages. Product owners are turning a rough thought into something that's demonstrable over a lunch break. And some of that work is genuinely good, but some of it is a small mountain of plausible looking rubbish that nobody in the room has the expertise to spot, and which is arguably worse than obviously bad work, because obviously bad work is going to get stopped. All of this is happening whether the design team blesses it or not, and it's happening fast, and that means it usually arrives before anybody thinks to get you as a designer involved. So the gatekeeper model is already broken. It's just that in a lot of places, nobody has admitted it yet. Now, I do understand the temptation. A design team is expensive and tooling has made production cheap, and somebody senior is asking whether there is really any return on investment to all that research anyway, which is a question that never seems to get asked about all those conferences the sales team seem to gallivant off to every 5 minutes. So the headcount that leaves doesn't get replaced, and the budget lines get trimmed, and the design team's seat at the table quietly becomes an invitation to comment after all the decisions have been made. What you lose in that trade is judgment, and it shows up about 2 quarters later, which is a conveniently long enough time that nobody connects the cuts in the design team to that cause. Every team invents its own version of the same UI patterns, so the product starts to feel like it was assembled by 3 different companies that have never met. Accessibility problems pile up because generated interfaces look fine and fail quietly. Decisions get made on assumptions rather than evidence, so you build something nobody wanted and you only find out after launch. And rework becomes the largest hidden line in your delivery costs, sitting there unattributed because nobody wants to write "we guessed" on a slide. The organizations getting this right are not the ones with the biggest design teams. They're the ones who've moved the design people upstream, away from producing every screen and towards setting the conditions in which everybody else produces decent ones. The version of this role that earns its keep looks less like a traditional designer and more like a conductor. Rather than routing all the design work through a small team and watching the queue form, you fund a design team to build the tools, standards, and guidance that everyone else needs to produce stuff. Quality gets protected through what you hand people rather than through being a gatekeeper that colleagues will happily route around anyway. In practice, that means investing in a handful of assets. The first is a design system, but a design system with real usage guidance. And I want to stress that guidance part, because a component library with no advice about when to use something or how to use it is just a very tidy box of parts. The test is whether a developer building a screen at 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon can make reasonable decisions when there isn't anyone there to check over their work. The second is a playbook for the work people keep repeating. Maybe a landing page playbook, for example, that walks marketers through the structure, evidence, and calls to action, so they're not reinventing it from scratch every single time and quietly reinventing it slightly worse every time. The third is a research repository that anybody can actually query, tagged, maintained, and searchable, because you've already paid for all that research, and right now it's sitting in a slide deck that only 3 people looked at once. The fourth is functional personas that stakeholders can interrogate, built around what customers are trying to get done rather than their age and that they enjoy hiking, and useful enough to settle an argument in a meeting, which in my opinion is the only real test of any good persona. And fifth is standards. Standards for briefing AI well, because the difference between useful output and confident nonsense sits almost entirely in the brief. And your design people are better placed than anyone in the building to teach that. Then alongside those assets, the team offers services rather than delivery. Open office hours for anyone who's about to build something, quick audits of work in progress, coaching for teams that seem to be getting it wrong a lot, and training for people who want to get it right. They still take on the genuinely hard work, high-risk design problems, of course, but they stop being the only route to a wireframe. Unfortunately, none of this survives contact with most design teams' key performance indicators because most are still measured on throughput. If you judge them on how many screens and tickets they get through, they'll keep behaving like a production line and the queue will reappear within a month. And you'll conclude that the whole idea didn't work when actually what happened is that you paid for one thing and rewarded another. So measure adoption of the design system instead. Measure reusing the existing research. Measure the quality of what non-designers are shipping without help, because that's the actual output of this model. The hiring mix shifts too. You need fewer people whose main strength is producing polished interfaces and more who can think about systems, standards, research operations, and how to influence colleagues who don't report into them, which is a skill nobody teaches and everybody needs. Then give them the authority to set standards that hold across all of the teams and get them into decisions early enough to be able to shape those decisions rather than waiting for them just to tidy up the bad results. If all of this sounds like a reorganization, it doesn't have to be. You can start small. Go and ask whoever runs design for you what people keep coming to them for week in and week out. Not what they think colleagues will want, but the requests they genuinely keep seeing. Then fund turning one of those into something the rest of the business can do without them. Maybe a playbook, one documented pattern, one persona that people can actually ask questions of, and see what this does to your queue, and then do the next one. A team working in this way will look less busy for a while, and busy has been our proxy for valuable for about 2 decades now. But that freed up time is entirely the point because it allows them to become more and more strategic. Now, there's considerably more I can say about all this than will fit into this short podcast, which is why I've put together a free course on exactly this. 14 short lessons on shifting from doing to directing. And you can sign up at uxcourse.boagworld.com. And it's worth forwarding to whoever leads your design work as well.